Welcome to Awakening the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christian Strang, and today we have a first in the history of Awakening the podcast. We have our first ever guest, and I am over the moon, which is appropriate considering her area of expertise. I'm over the moon to share with you all today Emily Trinkaus. She is one of my dear soul sisters from long, long ago. We met in the energy medicine swirls and have been sort of connecting in throughout the flow of life. And when I received the guidance from Mary Magdalene and Yeshua and the highest light that we were to start bringing on guests, she came in as our first guest. So all of the guests that we will be featuring on Awakening the podcast have been specifically chosen through my connection with my higher wisdom as being the ones that we most want to share with you to speak about their awakening process, creating the next golden age, and anything else that the divine brings up for us to share about. So I'll go ahead and begin by introducing you to this amazing astrologer if you have not yet met her. Emily Trinkaus fell in love with astrology at age 13 and has been a passionate student of the cosmic science ever since. She has practiced professionally since 1999 and currently offers online classes and personal readings to humans around the world. She also has a background in energy medicine, which infuses her approach to astrology as a healing art. Emily hosts the Embodied Aquarian Age podcast, featuring conversations with astrologers, healers, and other visionaries to support our awakening as organic, embodied humans through this time of transition. Emily, so happy you're here with us today.
I am so thrilled and honored to be your first podcast guest. Thank you, Christian.
So amazing, isn't it? When we met all those years ago, we had no idea what was in store for us.
No idea. And here we are.
And here we are. I love that. I love the work that you're doing. And I've talked about you extensively to my community. I've had many astrology readings throughout my incarnation. And I remember our first full natal chart reading you did with me. You gave me a piece of wisdom that I had never received before that literally just made my entire life make sense. And so I am thrilled to share your gifts with any and all called. And I want to start by talking about your process of awakening. I share a lot about, we know awakening is not a one-time event, right? We may have those more dramatic awakenings, but certainly, there are those everyday awakenings we have. And so on this podcast, I want to be talking more about this awakening journey. And I'd love to hear about any of your awakenings that you'd like to share relative to astrology and your path with it, or any part of your path that you feel called to share, because I really want to bring in this understanding that when we are here in a body, we are in the process of awakening to our true selves, and that is a journey that we are on.
Yes, thank you for that inquiry. And yeah, it feels like life has been an ongoing series of initiations into deeper levels of awakening. But in terms of astrology, as I say in my bio, I first was exposed to astrology when I was 13, and that was through the book Linda Goodman's Sun Signs, which was a very, probably the first mainstream astrology book in the modern times, and part of astrology's revival and coming back into the mainstream. This was, I guess, in the 70s. And so my best friend had a copy of that book, and I read it, and now it seems very simplistic, right? Sun signs, we know there's so much more to astrology than sun signs. But at that time, reading that and just simply reading about me being a Virgo and my sister being a Capricorn and my mom being an Aries, it was like something lit up for me. It was a huge, I think it was a huge remembering, really. And, I know so many people who say, oh, I've had so many astrology readings, or I've read so much about it and nothing sticks, and I get that. That's how I am with tarot cards. Like I've studied, I've learned, it just doesn't stick for me. But astrology is like, as soon as I was reminded that astrology exists, it was like this huge light bulb went off. And I think I must have done this for many lifetimes, because it was just like oh yeah, right, this. And so I think that was a really important moment of reconnection with something bigger, something beyond the materialist orientation to the world. And I was raised by an atheist, intellectual East Coast kind of, right? So
Wow.
there was no woo in my background, and I feel like astrology, and I didn't think of it at the time. I just thought, oh, this makes sense. This seems practical. This seems useful to be able to understand that, different people are really different. It's not that I'm right and you're wrong, or she's crazy and I know what's up. It's like, no, we're all really different. It helped me accept myself more and accept other people and just understand the world and kind of organize the world. But I think on a deeper level, it was waking me up to the great mystery of this mysterious multiverse. Because if astrology works, and in my now 40 years of playing with astrology, I have plenty of evidence that it does work. So if astrology works, and I believe it does, then we live in a very magical, miraculous, kind of mind-blowing multiverse, right? Like, it's kind of crazy that it works. So that point when I was 13 was huge. And then the next big awakening point for me was during my Saturn return, which happens for everyone around, well, the first Saturn return happens for everyone around age 29. And Saturn gets a bad rep, right? Like, oh, Saturn,
yes.
big bad guy. Oh no, Saturn's coming, run for the hills, But Saturn also has an awakening kind of component to it. And I know for myself, my Saturn return was a huge awakening point and a huge turning point. And I found myself living in New York City, which is where I was born. I didn't really grew up there, but I was born there and never thought I would live there again. But it was a series of unfortunate or fortunate events that sort of landed me back in my birthplace at my Saturn return. And it was, New York City is a phenomenally potent place on a spiritual level. There's a lot going on there. And at that time, I became absolutely obsessed with astrology. So I had been on an academic path. I thought I always wanted to teach and write. And I was in a PhD program, and I dropped out of that right before my Saturn return and didn't know, who I was or what I was going to do with my life. And so I end up back in New York City. I get completely obsessed with astrology, which at that time in the late 90s meant going to every bookstore to find the tiny little esoteric section and hopefully find a book on astrology, right? This is before before everything was on the internet. And then I had the great good fortune of studying with my first real astrology teacher, John Marcusella. And that just brought together so much, because I'd basically studied on my own since I was 13 and, secretly looking at people's charts and, reading what few books I could find. But to have an actual teacher just, huge, just, blasted me into a whole new dimension in terms of understanding astrology. And that's when I started giving readings to people, just to friends, like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but do you mind if I talk to you about your chart? And then friends told their friends and they told their friends. So it just developed very organically. It was never, when my high school guidance counselor talked to me about future career possibilities, astrology, somehow that was never on the list. But that's what came together really organically. And very fortuitously at the same time, I was also introduced to energy medicine. And, as that's how we know each other. So we have that, in common. But I don't know about you, but for me, like, sure, I had heard a little about it, but energy medicine is one of those things that I think until you experience it, it just doesn't.
Yes.
Right. It just sounds out there and weird and does whatever. But I had a friend who was a polarity therapist who offered to give me a session when my body was in crisis. And after 15 minutes of his doing, I don't know what, or it seemed like nothing, I felt completely different. And I said, what was that?
Yes.
And how can I learn? So that was
Yes.
also the start of energy medicine, which was a huge awakening as well, because that was about awakening to these subtle levels of reality that we're so connected with and so influenced by, but most of us are completely ignorant of, or our culture pretends that none of that exists. So to become aware of those subtle levels of reality and to become more empowered in terms of navigating reality with that awareness. And then, as you know, and as I say in my bio, that background in energy medicine really infuses my work as an astrologer, because then it's looking at the chart and looking at the the chart of now, or the chart of a person's birth chart, as a map of energy. And as we know, when it comes to energy, there is no good or bad energy. Right? It's just energy, right? It's just kind of like the weather. Like, is it bad that it's raining? Well, if you wanted to go for a picnic today, that's bad. But if you want your garden to be, to flourish, then it's not bad, right? It's just the weather. So that really helped me in terms of how I worked with, and how I continue to work with, astrology just as energy and energetic patterns, and helping people become more conscious of the patterns of energy that they were born with. So that's a long answer to your question.
Oh, beautiful. I'm like taking notes, and I want to touch on a few things here because they were so potent. One, it explains why you're my favorite astrologer, because my body only wants energy medicine. Since the moment I had my first session, it was just like, this is it. This is how we're taking care of this body. This is just the way it is. Right. And so I love how that training for you and that part of your awakening obviously supports the way that you're looking when you're looking at someone's imprint and what you're able to see in those subtle influences. That's so powerful. And you said a couple of other things that really I want to highlight because they were so potent. And one of them being like, astrology. Why astrology? You felt it. Whereas like tarot, I have the same response to tarot as well. And astrology just resonated for you. You just knew. Whereas some other modalities just didn't. And this is so important that we pay attention to this, because I think folks can get caught up in, whatever the trend du jour is of healing or divination or connecting into the divine. And it's really honoring when you feel that, like, yes. And that what you described as obsession with astrology is like our indicator. When we find something, I was the same way about energy medicine. I was like, I got to learn everything. I got to know it all, because that's the path for you. So I really wanted to highlight that, because I think sometimes over the years, 14 years I've been working with humans, I see them sort of try to push themselves into different things because, oh, that's what I should do, or that's what everyone else is doing. I mean, how did everyone end up in Western medicine, right? They're just following what, oh, this is what we do. But you allowed your desire to guide you and your knowing.
Yeah. And let me say something about that, because I think it's not an accident that this all came together for me at my Saturn return, right?
Yes.
Because the Saturn return is really, and I'll say not just the Saturn return, but anytime we're having a big Saturnian activation of our chart, which can happen in all kinds of ways. It's so much about coming into integrity with our true path and our true work. And for me, a lot of that had to do with, and I know I'm not alone in this, but had to do with separating from where I came from, right? And the expectation on me. I was always a very good student and, good. And I just thought, like, of course, I'm going to be an academic. And that's very in line with my family background and, very supported by my family background. So it felt like a huge risk to go in the direction of astrology. And, and that was 20 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, when astrology was even weirder and fringier than it is now. Now it's become a lot more mainstream. But then it was really like, what the hell is that? And why are you doing this bizarre thing? You're like this, straight A student, and, had this great career that you could have gone, like, what are you doing? So I just had to be willing to be weird and be the freak and not fit in. And that is, I think this is really huge for everybody right now, to follow what's true for you. And I want to say too, that this is, I think, part of the gift of astrology and how astrology can be helpful for people, because when somebody comes to me for a reading and I don't know them at all, right? I don't know anything, right? But I see something in their chart. And let's say I see like, wow, do you write? Like, I see you have this, it looks like you have a lot of energy around writing and some natural talent around that, blah, blah, blah. And if someone has been, maybe they've wanted to be a writer all their life, but they've been terrified, right? And like, no, I'm going to be an accountant because that's what my parents wanted me to do or whatever. And then they hear from a complete stranger, like, oh, right. Okay. So I'm getting this validation from somebody who doesn't even know me, just from, this map of my energy, that they can see this. So I think a lot of what astrology can do for people is validate what you already know. Like, I think that's part of my biggest job, is just validating what people already know, but maybe have been afraid to admit to themselves, or afraid to commit to, or maybe they know it, but it hasn't been, they know it more at a deeper, intuitive level, and it hasn't really hit the conscious level yet. Right. So I think, I think that's where astrology can be so practical and so useful in helping people identify, like, this is what you really came here to do. And yes, go for it, encouragement on the soul's path.
Absolutely. And you said when you were telling your initial awakening story at the start of this, that you were remembering astrology. And I sometimes say, like, we're reminders. I'm doing reminder work, because you really are just supporting another and remembering what their soul is truly encoded with and what they truly came here to do. And astrology is such an amazing tool for that. Exactly. The other piece I wanted to highlight that you said that was so powerful was that you'd been reading all the books and, like, self-teaching yourself astrology. And then when you found your first teacher, the power of that and how that catapulted you. This has been also my same experience. And it's been incredible to see the difference when you step into mentorship, when you step into having that support, that container holding you, your ability to integrate the information, unify with it, and then share it becomes accelerated when you connect with the soul resonant teacher. I wouldn't say just any, just grab a teacher here or there, but when you connect in, and when you told the story of connecting with your first teacher, I felt that energy as you were speaking about it, about how it really catapulted you. And that's another important part for the awakening journey. At whatever level you are, I've heard teachers and perhaps you have as well say, oh yeah, I got it figured out. I don't need a mentor. I don't need a teacher. And I just don't believe that at any level. We're interdependent. We all need each other. And when we have that kind of support, it really allows us to catapult onto our path with more feeling ferocity, with more passion, with more impact. And I'd love to hear, your take on this as well. But that I wanted to highlight that piece because I could feel the energy and see the energy of it as you were speaking about it.
Yeah. And I mean, in some sense, I could say, well, I had all these other teachers leading up to the in-person teacher, right? Like Linda Goodman, let's say my first astrology teacher, right? Via, and these other books I was lucky enough to get my hands on. But there's something about the let's say embodied human teacher who's right there, right? I think there's something about modeling in terms of like, oh, this is what it looks like when somebody is a professional astrologer. Again, I didn't, right? I didn't know anyone like that when I was a kid. I didn't have models for that. So to see what it actually looks like and to be in the presence of that and see someone who's teaching and working with clients. And I think that in itself was a huge transmission. And then there's also, and I think this is, astrology can get so mental, right? And so analytical and so up in the head. And especially if we're just reading books or looking at symbols on paper versus like talking to real people about real charts. And so that not only having a teacher, an embodied teacher right there, showing me what it looks like to be an astrologer, and of course, showing me, ways to talk about charts that I wouldn't have thought about. But then also I think the biggest teacher is in the doing of it. And I'm sure you can, relate to that too, as a practitioner of, as a practitioner of anything. It's so many people I know, like I've done a lot of teaching of other astrologers or teaching people how to be astrologers. And there can be this pattern of like, well, let me wait till I know everything and then I'll start doing readings. It's like, no.
Yes, that's right.
The only way you're going to get any better at this is by just doing it, and talking to actual people to see how the symbols are playing out in real life. Like I don't assume to know anything about somebody by just looking at their chart. Like I need to know, how is this playing out in real time? What are you doing with this? I mean, one of the ways I think of the chart is like genetic material, right? And as we know, genes can be expressed in all kinds of ways, and there's nothing deterministic about the genetic makeup you were born with. There are certain, limitations or proclivities or whatever, and that's the same for the chart. I really don't know how it's playing out for somebody unless I talk to them. So there's something very, just really important about that hands-on and willingness to not know, and willingness to say something that doesn't resonate, or say something stupid or seems stupid or whatever. That's so important, that willingness to take that risk of just doing it. And I think that's where a lot of people get stopped too. And I'll say, especially women, right? Who, we think like, in order to open my mouth, I better be like 99% sure I know what I'm talking about. Right. Which can be, quite restrictive in terms of becoming better at something, because we don't become better unless we're doing it.
Oh, I love this because it's lining up with so many of the conversations I'm having right now. We're coming to the completion of my certification program for our coaches, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Now we got to get out there and we got to do it. And folks are like, well, what if I make a mistake? It's okay. Like, this is the practice of getting into it, and really confidence comes through practice. And when you have a teacher or mentor holding that space for you, it's so powerful. And you said about, being willing to not know and be in the moment with whoever you're serving, and allowing your intuition, the intuition from the chart, the intuition from, whatever modality you're working with, to reveal itself to you. Being in that beginner mind is so valuable when you're stepping into anything, even if you've been doing it, for decades.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say, with astrology, I think a lot of people get into it, self included, because it seems like it's going to give us control, right? Some semblance, like, right, with astrology, well, what's going to happen? Or who is this person? Or will this be a good match for me? So astrology gives us this illusion of control. But for me, the more I've gotten into it, the more it's been this like initiation into the great mystery. And, it's like, the more I know, the more I don't know. And astrology, and this is part of what I love about astrology, it's endless. I could never call myself like, a master, like I've learned everything there is to learn, or I'm done learning. It's like, no, I've been learning astrology for 40 years and I continue to learn. And every time I read a chart, I learn, because it's like, oh, wow, look at that. Look at how that's playing out. I wouldn't have guessed that, but cool. That's perfect. So I feel like astrology is what is, for me, it's like an apprenticeship to the mystery. And this is my particular practice in terms of relating to the great mystery that is this mysterious multiverse. But it's not about it's not about controlling or locking it in somehow or nailing it down. It's just, it opens up more and more and more.
love that. To me, it's like the best part of being here on Earth. And that's why it's not like there's one awakening. And there's not just one universe, there's the multiverse. And, there are many, many awakenings available for us to continue to grow and remember who we really are and remember what we came to do. And what does that do over time? That is creating the life that we're living now. And my invitation to all who have the ears to hear is to allow that to create your golden age in the now, knowing that as we collectively do this, we are creating a more collective golden age experience. So I'd love to just shift our focus a little bit here, Emily, and talk a little bit about this creating the next golden age, because my intention is also that these podcast episodes will be inspiring to hear other stories of how they're showing up in living in their own golden age now, or creating that now, and any guidance or encouragement you have for listeners out there. So I want to just open it up and hear a little bit about your experience in creating your own golden age, your thoughts on the collective golden age, and any invitations you have for folks to, begin to create that in their own experience now.
Yeah, such a great question. And I want to address that in two ways in terms of astrology, with one being, or one having to do with self-knowledge and being very aware of your particular path and assignment during this time. And I imagine you'll agree with me that we all chose to incarnate at this time.
Yes.
Right? We wanted to be here at this time of awakening. We want to be here for the party. And
yep.
we are obviously ambitious souls to sign up for this.
Very.
And, one of the things I love about astrology is that it helps us clarify our unique assignment. Because we can be so conditioned to look outside and see what is everyone else doing. And we touched on this earlier in the conversation, right? What's everyone else doing? So what should I be doing? What's the right thing to do? What's the most important thing to do right now? Oh my God, the world's going crazy, so I better do something, that we can get caught up in that kind of spin. Like, what should I do? Where the chart it really shows a particular assignment. And I don't mean like a particular job or like form, but I mean more on that energetic level. Sometimes things can be, more literal than others, but I mean, that some people are really here to work at that vibrational level and like, yes, be in the ashram and send that vibe out into the world. Right. And right. And then other people might feel more comfortable, being at home alone or off in the meditation room or something, but actually their assignment is to bring that wisdom that they cultivated over previous incarnations out into the world, and and need to be out into the world, so astrology can help us. I think we all know at some level, but I think we've been so conditioned to disconnect from our true selves and disconnect from our knowing and not trust ourselves, that again, astrology is just a great reminder that that we can trust that little voice or that passion or that impulse that's in there. So to know ourselves and to know what role we came here to play and to really go for it, and always that requires a risk, right? As we've talked about, that requires a risk and getting out of our comfort zone. And then I think the other way that astrology can be so helpful right now is in terms of the kind of collective assignment and what are the energies of now, like in terms of the sky clock and how the planets are aligning and what they're guiding us toward in terms of what time is it, what is it time to work on or work at, what is everybody's assignment for this time. And right now I'm really thinking about Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth and transformation. We're in a very Plutonian time right now, as Pluto is at the end of Capricorn. It's been in Capricorn since 2008, and it's going to transition into Aquarius in 2023 and 2024. It'll be going a little backy forthy. And I think, what Pluto in Aquarius looks like, it depends on how we do Pluto in Capricorn. And what I mean by that is that Pluto in Aquarius could really bring out the extreme shadow of the Aquarian age, which is, in my perspective, that's the kind of transhumanist, techno dystopian, totalitarian, right? That version of Aquarius, which of course is that's not my golden age. And so what Pluto in Capricorn is calling for is like a radical self-authority and self-responsibility, because it's clear Capricorn rules the systems and structures of society. And Capricorn is also the sign of worldly power. So with Pluto and Capricorn, we see that that's all falling apart. Like those systems are, all the unsustainable systems are falling apart. And we're seeing the shadow of centralized power and, the power over paradigm that is clearly not working anymore. So it's kind of like, okay, Big Daddy's not taking care of us anymore, right? The systems are not there where we can't just
100.
Right. We can't just sort of coast along and expect like, oh yeah, my retirement fund is going to be there and the healthcare system is going to take care of me. It's like, no, instead we're being called into very, maybe it might seem extreme, like an extreme sense of self-responsibility. Okay, if none of these systems are in place, how am I going to eat? How am I going to take care of my health? How am I going to exchange, with other people? What economic model, right? So we're having to become very responsible. And I think that's a really good thing, because that's our huge growth experience right now. And part of that responsibility is facing what we've been afraid to look at, because Pluto has a lot to do with our shadow work as well. And so whatever we've been avoiding, or, oh, I'll deal with that someday, I don't really want to look at that right now. It's like, oh, it's time. It is time. Because if we can sort of master this Capricorn piece, which again, we're getting very, intense lessons around that right now and for the next couple of years. If we can master that, then we're setting ourselves up to really create the high vibe version of the age of Aquarius, which is about awakening and liberation and conscious community and collaboration and creativity. And, and of course, all of that's already happening. We're already doing that as well, but there's going to be an intensification around all of those themes once Pluto goes into Aquarius.
Thank you so much for breaking that down for us. This is one of the things I love so much about astrology, is that you can see exactly what's happening, is in the chart as well. So I want to just summarize and reiterate here for those who are listening, and also to get your confirmation that I heard you clearly. So one, in order to live your golden age, you need to get clear about what is my particular assignment at this time, for this time.
Yeah.
Two, to step into a greater state of self-reliance as the, I would say bad daddy systems show their true colors and are crumbling. So am I getting that? And is there another piece?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. And, and I'll just say too that, okay, we're transitioning into the age of Aquarius, which means we're coming from the age of Pisces. And part of why this responsibility and self-authority piece is so important is because we're purging the shadow of Pisces, which is, well, one of the headlines is victim consciousness. And so we're seeing that, kind of living large in the collective, but also confronting that within ourselves in a very real way, I think, and seeing all the ways and it might be more or less subtle, or there might be areas of life where you feel totally empowered and I'm on it and I got this, and other areas of life where like, oh, wow, it's too much, I can't do it. So we're all getting to become more aware of where we play the victim and healing that and really purging that from our own systems. And in doing that, we purge it from the collective.
So powerful. Okay, so we've got know your assignment, get clear about what your assignment is, become more self-reliant, in all the various ways that you're able to. And really, the victim consciousness is so huge. I'm seeing that in all of my sessions as well, coming up for folks, like really addressing the victim consciousness and all the subtle ways that that shows up. Even in sort of like new age speak, I hear people say, well, I guess it's just not meant to be, which is also a subtler form of victim consciousness. Well, I guess it's just, there's nothing I can do. And
Right.
the message that I keep getting is, stepping into our empowerment, so that this lit side of Aquarius that you're speaking about can come into form. But that doesn't happen unless we start doing it. If we're in a victim consciousness, we're waiting for it to happen. We are the ones to create this. And like you said, we were stoked about incarnating here for this time. So even though we're here sometimes and like, what the F was I thinking?
Right.
We did come with great purpose and passion and excitement to be the modelers, the demonstrators, the ones who were walking this path and doing the very things that we're talking about here today. So thank you so
Yes.
much for distilling that.
Yes, my pleasure. And I'll say, you mentioned how the victim consciousness can sneak into new age circles. And certainly when it comes to astrology, people can really go into that victim place. Oh, well, Saturn's doing this, so my life sucks or whatever. It's like, really? No.
Yeah.
Seeing it, I don't think the planets are doing anything to us. I do not think the planets are doing anything to us. I think planets are reflecting. They, as above, so below. They are reflecting for us and providing a mirror for us. And I think in terms of moving into the golden age, the age of Aquarius, I think that victim consciousness can come in too when people are like, well, I'll just sit over here and wait till things get better and wait till the golden age comes. Or it's like, no. It's coming because we're creating it. We're bringing it in. We're the ones bringing it in. So it's not a spectator sport, as I like to say. The age of Aquarius is a participatory sport. We're all in the game.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, because I find that being a message that I'm sharing a lot with folks who are highly empathic, or healers. Like, we have to actively participate in this. And to your point, get clear about what your assignment is and how you're meant to do that. Because like you said, there's various different, expressions of that. I was raising my hand when you said, and some people just want to be in their meditation room in their comfy, cozy space. And I'm, yes, here. And yet there may be an assignment that we need to have conversations like this and record them and put them out into the world. And we need to, be stepping in and really actively creating that next golden age. It's just, anyone who's waiting for anything to happen, you're out of alignment with the divine power that you are. And your divine power wants to create, because we are all creators. Exactly. So I love this conversation. Emily, is there anything else you want to share on the topic of awakening and creating the next golden age that we haven't covered? I feel like this is so rich and juicy. I just love it so much.
Well, I'll just say that it seems to me that a lot of the awakening process is really an undoing. That I think we're naturally awakened. Like, awakened is our natural state. And if we came into the world in the most, natural, I don't know, water birth, midwifed, beautiful process. Yes. If we didn't experience all kinds of trauma as little beings and have all this conditioning put on us, then we would just be naturally awake. And so I think, at least for me, it has felt like, in my experience, a lot of my awakening process has been about healing trauma and undoing old imprints or conditioning around who I'm supposed to be, versus just coming back more and more into who I naturally am. It's like awakening isn't adding anything. It's like it's already there. It's just uncovering it. Yeah.
1,000,000%. Could not agree with you more. Yeah, I say this all the time. Like, it's all there. We just have to untangle, unwind the pieces that say that we're not the divine, powerful, beautiful beings of the light that we truly are.
Right.
Thank you so much, Emily, for this conversation, for sharing your gifts with the world, for having the courage to honor each stage of your awakening and take action and to actively participate in this co-creation of the lit Aquarian age and of the golden age. I'm just so grateful for your presence here on Earth and all of the beautiful work that you do to assist other light beings in their remembering process. How can folks connect with you? What is the best way for them to connect?
Thank you. And thank you for that super sweet reflection, and right back at you, Christian. Yeah, my website is embodiedaquarian.com, and there you can find out about my classes and readings. And I have a blog, and there's also a link to my podcast on there. And then my podcast is on Substack, The Embodied Aquarian Age.
Beautiful. I highly recommend everyone check it out. Emily, you're amazing. Thank you again. And I feel like if you're open to it, we need to do some more of these, because there's 20 other things I want to talk to you about. So we have much content, much to dive into over the next several years.
Yeah, I would love that. It's such a pleasure to talk with you, Christian.
So much love to you. If this podcast was a benefit to you, please consider donating to Awakening the Podcast to bless it and support us in continually bringing you this high vibrational content. Please feel free to share it with anyone you know and love who is a light being who you believe would benefit from this. And of course, please be sure to connect with Emily Trinkaus, one of the best astrologers on the earth at this time. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Awakening the Podcast, and I am your host, Dr. Christian Strang.